Troublesome host. By the time we're done here, we will learn specific host values that could sabotage your calculations and how to avoid it. Well, I hope you've been going through the subnetting skills in order, essentially the order that I put them together, which is first off learning how to subnet based on the number of networks. Now we're learning in this skill how to subnet based on the number of hosts. And I think by now you're probably feeling like, yeah, this is good because I'm following the same format and it's very similar. It's almost identical outside of a few tweaks. So you're just really getting more practice to solidify it. And the format that I'm following is I'm starting with a Class C example, which is usually the easiest, then moving to a Class B and a Class A, and then I throw out the, oh, but watch out for this. And that's good because it pulls back the curtain a little bit on the binary side of it. And you're like, I see the mystique of how this works. This three-step process really is just taking all of the binary and saying, okay, let's make it a little friendlier to work with, right? So the process works by looking at the decimal equivalent of all of those binary values, those 8 bits that are in each one of those octets. And the first process is to say, okay, I want to convert the number of hosts to binary or convert the number of networks to binary, regardless of what you're looking for. And do you remember the problem that we ran into when I said convert the number of networks to binary? It was all around that 0 value, right? Since this starts counting from 0, we kind of get a bonus network thrown in there. And I gave the example, let's say we had 192.168.1.0, and I said, go ahead and break that into 2 networks. Well, our decimal minds look here and we go, 2. Okay, we need 2 bits to get the number 2. Well, that's actually not the case. And that's because with one binary value, you know that a binary value can be a 0 or a 1, we actually get a little 2 dongle, if you will. We can get 2 networks with 1. And I said that's why that, 2 to the power of stuff, where stuff is the number of bits, if we have 2 to the power of 1, it actually equals 2. We can get those 2 networks. And so what I said was, if you get a request to say, give me 16 networks or 32 or 64 or something that lands right on that boundary, recognize that you have that 0 value and you could just subtract 1 and figure it out. If they're asking for 64, figure it out for 63 because you kind of get a bonus network thrown in there. Well, exactly the same thing happens on the host side. It just looks a little bit different. Here's what I mean. On the host side, if I were to say, hey, let's figure it out for, let's just say 30 hosts, right? I want to figure this out for 30 hosts. Well, one of the things that we get is we get that 0 value. So we automatically kind of get a bonus. It's like we get 31 hosts. But not quite, because we never took into account. You remember when it says convert the number of hosts to binary, and we say, okay, well, it takes X number of bits to get those 30 hosts. We never said, oh, but subtract 2, right? And why did we subtract 2? Because of the network and the broadcast, right? Because every single one of those, we automatically lose 2 addresses, but we get the bonus 0, 1, right? So what does this mean? What does this end up with? It means that just like on the network side, there's certain values of host requirements that could end you up 1 short. Here's what I mean. If someone were to ask you for 31 hosts, first off, I would be like, what's your problem? Why are you asking for 31? Or 63 hosts or 127 hosts. Essentially, you ask for the number of hosts that's 1 short of that binary value. You could end up with a subnet that's not quite big enough. Here's what I mean. Let's work it out. For someone says, I want networks that are 31 hosts inside. And first off, I'd be like, okay, somebody's trying to scam me right there. But you would go, okay, well, you can't subtract 32, so your first one goes right there. And the actual binary value is 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. It's all ones, right? But if you do 2 to the power of stuff, where stuff is how many bits, 2 to the power of 5, right, is what that would be. That would actually be 32, right? But remember, we subtract 2. So if you were asked to do 31 hosts and put that first one right there, you would end up 1 short. This would only deliver 30 actual hosts. If you were asked for 63 hosts and you figure it out, you would end up with the same kind of thing. You would end up with one short because you get 62 actual hosts when you use 32 as your first one. So at the end of the day, essentially you lose the 2 host values, but that 0 makes up for it. If that's kind of fuzzy for you right now, where you're like, I think I get it, it's okay. It's okay. Just stare at it for a little while. As you look at the binary, you're gonna be like, okay. It's one of those things you just have to stare at. So there's 2 ways to avoid tripping down this wrong road. The first off is just to recognize those values, and they should be self-evident, because it's weird values like, hey, could you figure out subnets for 127 hosts? And you're like, why are you doing that? Could you figure out subnets for 511 hosts? Like, that's just not normal for somebody to ask for those subnet size. So recognize that you're like, okay, somebody's trying to trip me up, and no one would try and do that. I'm just saying that's the kind of thing that you would want to watch for. The second thing that you can do to avoid, if you don't want to remember that, just always add 1. So when somebody asks for 31 hosts, figure it out for 32. If someone asks for 15 hosts, ask for 16. If someone asks for 25 hosts, do 26. It never hurts, because remember, when you're working with binary, you're always going to get a little bit more. It's really rare that you're going to nail it right on the I'm getting exactly 30 hosts, and that's exactly what you wanted. It's really rare that you're going to hit it right on. You're always going to get a little bit more. So it never hurts to just add 1 to the number of hosts being requested. It will never mess you up. Those are the specific host values that could sabotage your calculations, and that's how you avoid it. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.